right, welcome to winter term, everyone. We've all had a good first week. We have a kind of a breezy schedule today. First up, we have to approve minutes for both our last regular session on December 2nd and also the minutes from the special session on December 9th. Would anyone like to make a motion first on December 2nd?
I move to approve the.
Second. Move, baby. Lori moves and Brian seconds.
Brian left the party.
Brian.
So he's doing his part.
I appreciate it. Are there any notes or addendums or corrections to the minutes from the second? All those in favor of approving the minutes for December 2nd, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Oh, I should have noted, welcome back to Mary Ann, who is not Enrique, but we don't have a sign.
I tried to make it Enrique again, but it didn't work.
And from Michael Parker. Yep. So welcome. All right, so that motion passes. Would we like to see a motion on the December 9th special session?
I'll move to approve.
Second. You're a little slow there.
Yeah.
She was talking. Anyone have any corrections to those minutes? Right. All those in favor of approving the minutes for December 9th special session, please. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. Motion passes as well. Okay, it is our treat this week to welcome Trustee Deborah Rosenberg. Deborah, welcome.
It's lovely to see you all. It's nice to be in this room. Thank you, Andrew, for having me. I was asked to come and speak about board participation, what it's like to be a Board of Trustee member. My term is coming up, which means I can either apply for reappointment or step down and have one of you step up. And I'm comfortable with either decision. I explained to Andrew that I would love to continue with the Faculty Senate's support, because that would feel better, since my job is representing the member of the faculty on the Board of Trustees. I'm happy to answer questions about how the board operates, my role on it. I'd like to assure you, the members of the Board of Trustees are extraordinary people, and they are absolutely committed to the health and well-being of this campus, its administration, its faculty, its staff, and most of all, its students. These are dedicated, serious people who take their work they do it very intentionally and very carefully. It is an honor to be amongst them. I think we're particularly fortunate in our board makeup that we have a faculty member, a staff member, and a student from SOU on the board. Because the three of us, or people in those positions, are uniquely able to answer all kinds of questions that the board, members of the board know about many, many, many things, but we are the people who know this campus the best. So I think that inclusion on our board was really important and makes a huge difference in the running of the board. We are asked regularly for our opinion and our expertise in all sorts of areas. Have you questions for me?
Are you a voting member of the?
Yes, I am.
So, any fun insights that being in there?
It's going well.
Yeah.
Good decisions are being made. People research thoroughly. We have lots to read, and people, again, they do their work, so that when we do need to make decisions, they are well-considered decisions and not arbitrary, whimsical decisions.
So I'm thinking about, what would be a question they asked you that you were able to give some insight in?
Great question.
From our perspective, yeah.
I get asked a lot if the president's strategic plan is actually being put in place. It's actually working, it's doing its job. And I assure people that yes, we're living it every day in many, many, many ways. I get asked that a lot. I get asked how the faculty feels about various things. And of course, I can't answer how the whole faculty feels about anything. I can certainly talk about what I feel and what I observe from our colleagues. I try to be very careful of not speaking for all of us, since that's not my job. I think that would be presumptuous, but I tell the truth. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure I'd ask this question either, but I'll just blurt it out. As I recall, you're a voting member, but the faculty member, the staff member, and the student member are by statute excluded from some things. Is that not true?
That is not true. Our terms are shorter.
No, I know that. I meant like if you were,
You're included for collective bargaining.
Collective
Collective
bargaining,
bargaining.
conversations
Yeah.
specifically.
I mean, hadn't yet. So I just wondered if you even noticed that. I mean, because most of the discussions I would think would have happened at maybe the finance committee level as opposed to the full board. I don't know, but I just wondered, apparently nothing that you felt excluded about or felt like weird stuff was happening behind the scenes or anything like that.
I've never felt that. I've never felt excluded. And that was one of my surprises in the first week, because I was brand new on the board and I had an opinion on something. And it was taken seriously on the first day. And I was really surprised and gratified by that. And in fact, that's true of all of us. The student representative is taken seriously. The staff representative is taken seriously. Every board member treats each other fairly. We're in great hands with Lynn Henyon as the chair. She's a very sensible person. It helps.
Deborah, which committee are you on?
I'm on the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, particularly, which makes sense.
I just want to be clear, Kimball, they are included on my contract negotiations as well. They're
Okay.
not excluded from that, at my evaluation and negotiation.
It's just collective.
Collecting bargaining.
Yes, just collective bargaining.
It's really just the update about where bargaining is, very specifically that's done with Brian, and so, I mean, it's not a full board conversation.
Right.
That's only happened once.
Yeah, yeah.
That's probably why you didn't notice.
They didn't tell me I was being excluded.
Just want to make you a little paranoid.
Feels better, feels more comfortable.
Yeah.
Basically, there's three major committees, and then there's the full board meeting, so that when we have 2 days of board meetings every quarter. And those are typically 2 meetings on the Thursday afternoon, the third meeting on the Friday morning, and then the full board meeting on the Friday afternoon. I go to all the meetings, because I feel that I just need to keep educating myself on everything we're doing. I feel much better informed. And certain things, it helps to hear twice.
One thing I hear from Deborah and from the staff member is that you really didn't realize how much sort of work was done and how much prep there was going to be for every meeting.
Yeah.
How big is our packet this time? It's 100 pages or something.
It's a lot of reading.
Part of it's the GSWS proposal.
And there is, and correct, there's no release for the faculty representative, right?
No, there's no rules. Any other questions? Random? Yes.
How long did you say that your term lasts?
It's a 2-year term.
2-year term?
So I'm sort of at a term and a half. It goes till June, and so that and the governor's office makes the appointments to the board. So it comes from them, and the process is fairly lengthy. So that's why we were asked to submit our materials now, so that the governor's office has time to kind of go through all the different steps.
Is there a reason, I'm not asking you directly, but maybe I'm asking you, is there a reason why there isn't a course for these?
There's no
students?
compensation for any of the trustees, and so it would be out of line with the policies and procedures for me to offer compensation to a faculty or staff member in the case of faculty release, in the case of staff, some other form. So It's not something that I've been asked to consider or actually is built into the bylaws of the trustees.
I presume that's the same way at all the universities?
I believe so, yeah. I don't think any of the boards were offered that opportunity for faculty and staff.
We do get lunch.
You actually get a lot of good food.
Jeff?
Let me ask you this, so it's 2 years.
Yes.
And, you know, that's just enough time to get your feet wet and start to know people. Do you think it'd be more advantageous for you to continue on in this position, knowing, you know, you've got some good momentum going? Or would it be better to have a different perspective come into the board?
That's an interesting question. I would love to continue. Personally, I would love to continue. And I think the continuity is useful. But again, if you decide differently, then I absolutely support the Faculty Senate's decision. I'm happy with either outcome.
I can share what Sabrina Prudhomme said to me when I asked her a similar question. So keep in mind the faculty term is 2 years, whereas the other, and the staff and the student is right, well, and then the other board members would have a 3-year term. And so Sabrina did say that, you know, it really is a case where you spend a year just kind of finding your feet in a way, and that all else being equal, assuming a trustee is competent and contributing, the board itself certainly appreciates continuity because when you do replace a board member, that does mean that there's a new learning curve for getting up and running. And then there was some confusion, and I apologize for my part that exactly how the reappointment or applications works. This is actually our only second time now having someone who is eligible to be reappointed. But actually anyone at any time can apply to the faculty trustee, and that's that website I shared. It does not actually have to come as a recommendation from the Senate, although last time we did recommend some names, but that's not a requirement at any stage. And what Sabrina told me is that basically when it comes time for the governor to make the appointment or reappointment, the governor will look at whatever applications are there, and then we'll call the board, the chair of the board, and ask for their recommendation. And that the board's recommendation, again, all else being equal, would probably be for continuity. But they also said that the board was sensitive to wanting to, given that this is a faculty position, wouldn't want to recommend a reappointment if there was an issue or if the faculty had a strong feeling about wanting a new voice or something like that. I also went looking into our minutes, and I had trouble. I still have not tracked down the actual vote, but multiple people, including Dennis Slattery, have told me that they recall some sort of vote of confidence, essentially, that when Dennis was up for reappointment, the Senate did sort of say, Dennis is doing a good job. So I wanted to let you know that. I'm not urging one way or the other of what we should do. I know that it's possible that there are other faculty who are interested in applying, but I do also appreciate that Deborah is sort of wanting to know that the faculty support her reappointment as opposed to her just, you know, power. So any other questions or comments?
So I'm going to serve as a literal voice for Prakash. What advantage do you believe you have in continuing your service, or what advantage to the faculty in your particular continued service?
Me personally?
Yeah.
That's a great question. Thank you both. Partly, I've been at SOU for 20 years, which shocks and amazes me. I've served in many different, I started on one committee. I've served in many different kinds of roles. I've been chair of 2 different departments. I've been in faculty senate. I think I know fairly thoroughly how this campus has functioned, could function. I know many key members of the administration and the faculty senate. Because of my theater background, we naturally work collaboratively and gather data and information before we make impossible decisions. And I have a sense of humor. So all of these things seem to contribute to my effectiveness as a board member at this time. However, if you as a faculty senate decide that you'd like somebody else in the position, I absolutely, with no, thank you, reservation. I was thinking ill will. Would absolutely.
So was I, but I
A
said.
minimum of swearing.
That level of administrative diplomacy that I have to aspire
There's a
to.
humor coming through there.
Is
And
that-
it is a 2-term limit, so
Right.
if she serves a second term, then she's done it.
Yep, okay. I'm curious, why is it 2 years for faculty and staff and 3 years for the other one?
Oh, well done before I got there.
Yeah.
That's the legislation, right? That's the.
Yeah, I don't know, I think it was in statute that way, I'd have to go back and look, but it's the same for all 7 institutions.
Okay.
I mean, it makes sense for a student.
For a student, but not for a faculty member, yeah.
We usually have longer than 4-year careers. but-
Yeah.
So true.
For better or for worse. Any other questions or comments for that, Deborah?
I just want to say thank you,
Yeah.
I mean, for your work and for being willing to do it again, and I personally can't imagine anyone else doing a better job than I know you're doing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I second that.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, I know you have things to talk about, so
Okay.
thank you for having me today. Lovely to see you.
Thank you, Deborah. All right, next up, President Shaw, your report.
Thank you. Good to see everybody back. I hope you had a wonderful break. We do have board meetings coming up this week, so that's, as you heard from Deborah, that's very time consuming in attendance. It's also very time consuming in terms of us all getting ready for those meetings. So that's sort of been top of mind for us. Nothing, Sue's going to go over some of the things. We're going to do an update on the strategic plan. We do that twice a year with the board, January and June, so this is the time to do that. The financial updates, I mean, there's nothing huge that I can think of that you need to be aware of. We're always happy to have you attend or listen in, or however you would like, if you'd like to participate. I always do a president's report. One of the things I'll be talking about is the Presidential Task Force on Financial Sustainability. This group's all aware of that because we've been talking about who you will select as the faculty representative. I wanted to go through the people who have agreed to serve on the task force. You have the charter, it's in your drive, that shows, all the different positions, again, modeled on what's in the current governance documents. So the people who have agreed to serve at this point, John King, Brett Anderson, Chance Whiteeyes, Gordon Carrier, Helen Eckert, Karen Stone, Jonathan Chavez Baez, and students Sarah Grulikowski and student Paige Leeper. And then and then we're still waiting for the faculty, the second faculty person. Greg Perkinson will chair. There are a lot of ad hoc members by virtue of their position who will serve on that group and provide, and then there'll be some subject matter experts such as Josh Laverne with the budget office. Greg has been assembling materials. He's put a lot of stuff on a drive. He's going to start reaching out to folks as they are, now that we have almost everybody confirmed, and start scheduling meetings. I expect the meetings to start as soon after you get someone selected as possible, but no later than early February. And they'll have a lot of reading to do. It's going to be a lot of education at the beginning because many of the people I've named have not been closely involved with budgeting or with the financial picture, just the big trends in the country. So a lot of the first part of the work will be educational. Let's see, other than that, I wanted to just, we've got this university community collaborations, comes out of Strategic Direction 4. We have several groups working now. We have one on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Suresh Apadu is meeting with colleagues from around the city, Shakespeare School District, Asante, And they're talking about how we can make Ashland an even more welcoming community. We have another one, the IT officers from Tom Battaglia, the guy from Asante, from OSF, from the school district. They all got together, they had a great meeting, and they just felt like it was really productive to get to know each other so that they can begin to talk about common challenges and what if somebody gets hit by ransomware and can we use each other's, equipment for a little while, just that kind of thing. And then Greg Perkinson is on a group on emergency management, so really tying in with all those other entities and how they're planning for emergencies. I heard that they're planning to do a Ashland evacuation drill sometime in August, so stay tuned. We may all get to practice evacuating, which is probably not a bad thing, but I'm glad I don't have to organize it. And finally, we have been working on a survey that we will be distributing out through the community. It's a community perception survey. Chris Stanek is designing it for us. And it gets at things like, asking people from all over the community, how do you interact with SOU? Do you know a faculty member? In what capacity? Do you know a student? Do you hire a student? Have you had a student as an intern? What do you think of SOU's impact on parking, on traffic? Do you have problems with student partying? Just all those kinds of things to try to get a baseline of how people are perceiving the university. I met with the chamber board. They voted in favor of distributing it through their membership. So it will go out to chamber members, and then we've got a whole list of other groups that we will distribute it to try to get back this information. And once we do, I'll be sure to share that with you. On the legislative front, we put forward a request for capital funds for a building that would have helped with music, digital media. That was, it ranked higher than a previous project had, but still probably not high enough to actually get funding, although we really don't. The governor hasn't said how much she's going to encourage the legislature to release in bonds. We think it's going to be about $200 million, and we're below that line. But we get to come back again next time and sharpen our proposal, and other projects will be off, and we can move up the list. The good news was that we put forward a proposal for, I think, $3.5 million to demolish Cascades so that we can use that land for something more productive. And it didn't get ranked as a capital project because it's for demolition, not for construction. But the HEC prioritized it and encouraged the legislature to make a direct allocation to enable us to demolish that because it will reduce energy consumption, it will reduce our deferred maintenance, and help us in other ways. So that'll be one of the main things that Gina and I and others will be lobbying around during the short session of February and into early March. Is trying to get that allocation. So keep you posted on how that goes. Right now we continue to use that as swing space while we do other construction projects. Little bit of good news, I'll wrap up on that. There's a lot of concern among the legislature about transfer credits and, universities don't accept community college credits. We've looked in depth at, and I think it was this year's class that Matt Stillman looked at, and we accepted over 93% of the transfer credits that students tried to bring to us. The ones we didn't accept were remedial classes and failed courses. The bottom line is we are not the problem that the legislators are concerned about, and we just need to keep telling them that. There will be a bill this year. Senator Wagner is putting something forward around transfer credits, and we haven't seen it yet, so we don't know what exactly it's going to look like. But I don't think there's much more work for us to do there. And then finally, we always look at student retention from year to year, and we also look at it from fall to winter to spring. So you have a certain enrollment in the fall, and how much melts off before the winter term starts. And cautious optimism in that normally, and these numbers are taken by the end of the term. So in previous years, we've lost over 5% from the end of fall to the end of winter, and we will lose some more. But right now, we've only lost about 2.5%. So at this point in time, we're doing better. And I know it's because all of you and the advisors, the SOCs, everybody is working hard to try to help students stay if it's at all possible. So thank you for the good work that you're doing, and we'll keep tracking that. Let's hope that the numbers stay good. That's all for me.
Linda, we got an email about ethical conduct.
That's my annual,
I was wondering if it was on your checklist or if
Yeah.
there was a trigger for that.
it's just,
Did you guys?
We didn't get it.
as part of my responsibilities as president, I have to send out this annual reminder.
All right.
And one of the things our auditor looks at is, did the president remember to send out her annual reminder? So I did.
All right, thank you.
So check that off. No big concern, just reminding everybody that we're good stewards of state money.
And I had a quick question about the capital project. I obviously had a sort of vested interest in that music DMC project.
Right.
You know, it was the only SOU project in the top 10 and yet ranked so low. Why is that? And is
Because there's a project from PSU that's eating up $70 million.
why don't they get it?
So, well, you know, it just depends on what people and how the heck scores it and everything. So generally, folks go in with projects that are more 20, 25, you know, somewhere, but like we might have a project that's 6 million, as Central Hall was, I think. But others don't get any bigger. But PSU has a real need for a new science building, I believe it is. Is that right? It's a big one. So it's eating a big chunk of the dollars, even though we rank higher.
If you got a larger allocation from the governor,
We could
it
go
could
farther
go
down.
further, yeah, forward.
I think the state actually has the ability to issue more bonds, but they're always reluctant to go to the full extent of that ability because they don't know what might be coming. There is potentially some good news around PERS. There was an article today that the PERS investments did better than anticipated, and so our rate increases, it's anticipated that our rate increases that have been huge over the last few years will be leveling off. So that's another little bit of good news. And we'll keep working on that project. It's a great project, and we'll just keep pushing it.
The reduction in PERS expenses, is that the great?
No, it's the PNC music new facility.
Sue.
Yes, so I'm going to preface my updates with just a thank you and acknowledgement of a lot of work that happened over the summer and over fall term. As we were putting together our updates for the trustees for the board meeting on Friday, I was compiling all of these things that, you know, we're over here and over here and over here. And once I got it into Improve and started seeing all of the progress that had been made in SD1, I just had to sort of take a moment of appreciation for all of the work that you all have done and the directors and other support staff on campus. And I'll just hit a few of the highlights, but honestly, I had a hard time getting my summary into one page. And that was a good feeling. So hopefully the trustees will see all of the work. But I mean, you know about the Gen Ed work, so we've resumed meeting starting last Friday. We'll be continuing to meet every Friday. And you had the special presentation. I know that you approved curriculum, but I think it's kind of nice to remind you that since our last update to the board, which was June of 19, we've got concentrations, 2 new concentrations in finance and healthcare admin for the online MBA, online Master of Science and Education now, new started in the fall. Our new digital cinema major is well into its first year. Our online innovation and leadership major is fully going. Our online psychology major is in development, so we're working on that. We have a new major, as you know, in GSWS with a transgender certificate that will go in front of the board this week. So it's really, I think, heartening to see all of the good curricular work that we're doing. So thank you. A couple of other things, you know, the task forces have been working in FPAR and post-tenure review and faculty rewards and other areas. Just a thank you to those folks, Kimball and Dennis and David McCandless and Dustin Walter and I spent our Friday evening in my office until about 5:30 talking about post-tenure review, and that was a lot of dedication in terms of time on their part. But they wanted to know what I thought about a few things, and I was happy to be appreciative and happy to have been asked and to share and to have them listen very seriously and intently. We continue work on adult learners. There's a lot going on, but one of the things that I thought you might appreciate is that SOU participated in a prior learning assessment impact study that was sponsored by the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, which is CALE, for some of you who know that work, and then the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, WICHE, and you've heard that acronym before. So the purpose of that study was to assess the impact of various forms of prior learning assessment on student outcomes. And so we looked at challenge exams, portfolio assessments, credit for military service, or other kinds of training that adult learners might receive in occupations outside of the higher ed forum, traditionally sort of model, and then how we can offer credit for those accomplishments or trainings. We do that in our INL program right now, but it's a very small end of students. So our hope is to, especially with military veterans, our hope is to increase the assessments on those groups of students. And we're in the process of seeing what that data tell us about persistence and completion and the things that we need to know to get those students moving through. And then I'll just end on a major accomplishment for me, and that was to create the academic program review process. We've been working on this for a couple of years. We haven't had one since 2014. So we now have a process through which a third of the programs will go through the academic program review process, and then it's on a 3-year cycle, so will be ongoing. And I'm really pleased to have had certain programs reach out to me and say, hey, can we go this year? We want to do some planning. We haven't had a chance to have any good sort of curricular review conversations or targets for enrollment. So this is a chance for us to look forward, be a little aspirational, but also do a deep dive into our programs. So I think it's going to be a good process. So thank you again. It was a pleasure to put together my 6-month report for SD1 progress.
So I have a question, and it's really for both of you, because I don't know where we are on this. In the fall, Matt Stillman came and talked to us about planning the academic calendar.
Right.
And I'm wondering where we are on that, because a lot of us are planning our next year's schedules now. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious, has anything been decided?
I think they decided to go forward with the proposal. Remember, this was for just next year.
Okay.
Because there might be some changes, but I think that, who was
Came to cabinet.
Yeah, it came to cabinet, it came to advisory council, I think, or at least to this body. Who was his partner in crime in the presentation? It was Brittany? It was Brittany Miles, the student body president. No?
Alana.
Oh, it was Alana, sorry, our HR director, that's right. But they did get student input. I think they're going forward with it as proposed. They didn't hear any significant feedback. So let me make a note to Matt, and I'll just have him put it out officially.
So it was announced that it would be a Wednesday start for classes, so Wednesday of week 0, we would take Veterans Day off, and there would be no
Right.
classes on the Wednesday preceding Thanksgiving, but that Wednesday would be a day that the school was open, so people
Right.
could conduct business.
I think he needs to send an email out to
Let everybody know.
chairs and directors and let everybody know, and all faculty.
He announced that, I thought he announced it, I didn't get an email out, but he announced it to chairs and directors, but I didn't know if it was finalized. And then there'd be a 2-week spring break.
2 weeks spring break,
There would be a week 0.
No, not in that.
Oh, excuse me.
No, that wasn't part of it.
Nice
I said it, it happened.
That will be sent.
Is it seconded?
We'll make it official. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. All right, so moving on to Kimball with advisory council update.
Yeah, so we met last Monday. We do an intervening or alternating Mondays for the Senate meeting. Most of our discussion, as usual, is what kinds of things do we see coming up on this coming Senate meeting. We set this agenda, we look ahead with, just some other things coming up. But, so I usually focus my report to you all on things that come up other than just pure scheduling of events. So one thing that, this is not in chronological order of the meeting, but it's the way I'm organizing things. Paul Brent brought up an idea which apparently circulated before about a wellness credit. And I'm not the right person to describe this to you, but it's an idea that's been kicked around before. And it's way too preliminary for us to bring anything to you all, but it's a way, I think the way Paul put it is sort of getting back from some of the advantages that the plateau gave people to get an extra credit for 0 or less money than just the marginal cost. So I'm not going to tell you anything more than that mysterious, but at some point we may be bringing to the Senate a further discussion of this idea once we get kind of an economic go-ahead on it. Another thing we discussed, and this was actually well discussed by Deborah herself about her term finishing up as the first 2 years of a potential, or what will we do to name the next faculty representative? That was, we saw some emails about that, and so we discussed that. One thing we discussed a little bit about was how to sort of complete the FBAR task force work, and I should let Andrew speak to this, but the way we left it at our meeting was that Andrew was going to contact Joan and that task force and see if they would, after getting our input, bring us some actual kind of maybe a choice of ways to go forward with recommendations on FBARs. And then I'll just side note that we also talked about some of the other task forces, and as Sue mentioned, the post-tenure, post-promotion task force, of which Janice and I are members. We met with Sue on Friday. We're getting close to, we will definitely want to come this quarter with some recommendations to you all about the work there. And then the last thing that we discussed was the issue that President Schott brought up about how would the Senate recommend somebody for the Sustainability Task Force. When last you all left in December, at that time there was only one person that had expressed an interest, and that was Dennis Slattery. In that meeting, since then, Devorah Shapiro indicated she would be interested in serving, and we all briefly discussed what we knew about those two folks, shall we say, strengths and weaknesses for the position. And I think at the advisory council, we felt like both would be really good. And so I think I wanted to sort of pass the baton to you, because at some point we have to make a recommendation as a Senate to President Schott about the faculty member we want to recommend for that group.
Sure. So, actually been fairly unusual, I think, when we've been asked to make a recommendation that we've had more than one volunteer for one slot. And usually it's like, oh, this person's perfect, and they're willing to do it, and that's how it's been done. So this is actually the first time when we have two really qualified volunteers for one slot. And so I have extended a invitation to both of them to submit a statement to Senate, and also to come to Senate at our next session if they would like to, but I will at least have a statement from each of them, kind of speaking to what they bring to this experience in terms of their own background and perspective, and the reason they want to serve on the task force. And then what we sort of need to decide is how we would want, as a Senate, to choose that person. Would we feel comfortable with a voice vote? Do we want to do a secret ballot? How do you all want to do that? Because we haven't had a lot of opportunities in which we've had to sort of vote on a person to be an appointee. But in this case, what are your all thoughts on that?
Is there a possibility of having two?
It's a big task force, there's a lot of people, and I think they want to keep it to the original charge. 1.2%.
There are three faculty seats. So,
It was a chair, and then President Schott picked a,
The division director, chair, well, two, yeah, the division director,
Senate.
otherwise isn't.
chair and yours, yeah.
So who are because John King's the director, Brad Anderson is the
He's
chair,
the chair,
and then who was the other?
Chance White Eyes
Okay.
from the NAS, and then this group's pick.
Thank you.
And do you want to talk for a second just about the subgroup? I
Well,
mean, where faculty involvement would be.
yeah, there'll be additional faculty involvement. I mean, the way the thing is set up, the group can form subgroups. And I fully expect that there'll be a rigorous group formed around this issue of academic program portfolio review and looking to make sure we're aligned with marketplace needs, student needs, all of those things. And also, yes, looking at all of that. So there will be much more opportunity for faculty involvement in that conversation. So this appointment is just for the overall task force. That'll be looking at efficiencies, you know, where can we find, losing a thumb there, right? Where can we gain efficiencies? Do we wanna, how can we gain revenue? Do we wanna enter into any public-private partnerships? You know, the example I used was like a university-based retirement community or something else. Anyway, so there are many topics that this group will look at, and each one of those might form subgroups, and I would expect might be looking for faculty involvement in those various subgroups. But we're looking for one person for the overall group.
So I have an opinion that I'd like to proffer. In years past, at the end of Senate, we would often have competitive elections, for example, for people being on the advisory council. Not so much recently, we've almost kind of horse traded consensus, found the 3 people we would name. But in years past, there have been 5 or 6 people that would want to do it. And what we did then, the years I was on Senate, we would actually have a secret ballot on it and take the top 3. To me, I guess I would feel more comfortable if we would be willing to do a secret ballot. I don't feel like, you know, Janice and DeVore are both really good people. We would be well served by either one of them. I truly believe that. But I don't feel like we need to make it a public personality contest, in effect. I like the idea of reading what they have to say about themselves and you know, considering their resume or whatever, but I'm going to counsel that we do a secret ballot.
So would we do that?
Well, I was thinking we probably just do it here. I mean, we just pieces of paper, you know. But, I mean, that's just me thinking out loud.
That we recycle.
That we would recycle, we would shred.
is that a motion?
I wanted to discuss it first. I'm happy to move it.
Anyone have any alternative views on that question?
Why do you think people don't want to say who they would prefer?
I personally want to pick one of those people, but don't want the other person to know I didn't pick them. I'm speaking for me. We don't need to release the numbers or anything. Just, you know, that's my opinion. If you guys do it publicly, I'll vote. So we'll vote.
Secret ballots for other things.
Right.
So for Senate Chair, for instance, and for representatives to various things, so it seems like it would be silly to have a different system for this.
Kimball, I'm on board. I like the idea of not creating an opportunity to shame or embarrass, whether it be the people we're voting for or each other.
Second that too.
Okay. What do you say? Well, heck, I'll move it. I move we have a secret ballot.
Second it.
So,
Sorry, Lori.
Enrique.
Only when you're needed.
Oh, and oh.
Any further discussion on that? all those in favor of holding a secret ballot on our Senate appointment to the Presidential Task Force on Financial Sustainability at our next Senate meeting, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstained? All right, the motion passes, and that's what we'll do. Again, I don't know yet if they will be coming in to speak to Senate, but I will at least have statements for you to look at. I've asked for them by Wednesday of next week, so they'll have time to review those before. All right, thank you all. Is anyone here from ASSOU? The first time? All right, I'll move on.
I can do it.
Do you want it?
Yeah.
Good,
At ASSOU, we just approved our ASSOU budget for next term. We took a lot of cuts and a lot of positions are being removed for the next year. SFBC, our budget committee, had to do some second review after they learned some things about the process that they had to go through, but they are pushing through something for the Senate to approve next meeting, hopefully, and then for that to go to allocations after that.
Can you speak of any of the kinds of positions that are going to be cut?
So our Director of Internal Affairs, Director of Internal Relations is being cut. All division senators are being cut, so they're not going to be a senator from like social sciences or STEM or BCE. And then our Director of Student Advocacy is also being cut.
All right. We will have a schedule. Dave Carter's going to be coming for the academic call. Oh, are you?
I'm Dave Carter.
Oh, you're Dave Carter. All right.
Also
Jody,
not
you may have the
still
floor
none.
to speak to about
No
the
idea what it
academic
sounds like in my
policy.
head right now. So we're submitting two academic policies. They're both changes. One refers to a previous practice of waiting for a specific period of time before allowing a student to apply, to have credit from a non-regionally accredited institution applied. Matt estimates that the number of times that he has been asked to review one of these in the last 10 years is 0. And we don't know that there is any student for whom this really serves a purpose, nor does it really serve the institution well. I think part of, and I appreciated that Sue had talked a little bit earlier about the KL Witchy work that we did about credit for prior learning. Because I think that were a student to be wanting to demonstrate that they had capacity in a certain area, in a certain disciplinary focus, then they would be additional channels for them rather than trying to work through non-accredited institutional credits. So this felt like a good decision for us to make. The second is simply an alteration to the time frame in which a student has to change from a graded grade to a pass, no pass. Graded grade is not the term that we're using. I just clear that. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
That was my main question about that first policy change would be how many instances were approved or came up for petition?
Very few.
Very few.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably in some ways, I think the fact that these kinds of things don't come up as frequently as they might, I think there's a lot of students who bring in the intent or experiences that they would like to see applied in some way. And there's a lot of work, as Sue mentioned, and there's a lot of different places in which we're trying to facilitate that happening. So we can, just increase capacity for students to move through quickly. But this particular situation, no. We don't have that many institutions that are feeder schools or that students go to that are non-regionally accredited. There are 2 that we can think of, and the credit hours that the students brought wouldn't have made much difference anyway.
So there might be opportunities for students with the experiences maybe that she discussed to meet credit.
That would be a
by-
much better route, and it's a much more rigorous
Program
route.
by
than that.
program, perhaps.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Right. So here's a convoluted question.
Convoluted answer.
Excellent. if we accept, so I'll just speak of criminology, criminal justice, we're in the idea phase of accepting law enforcement credits from the academy. Many community colleges will accept work, they get it transcribed as some coursework at the community college. So our question was, would the police academy be considered a non-accrediting agency?
Yeah, probably. However, what this would also mean is that the credit for prior learning policy should give you the opportunity to capture those credit hours or to name them and to give them an institutional status.
Now, what happens if this person went to the academy, went to Rogue Community College, which would accept their credits, transfer to something, and then you transfer from Rogue to us?
Yeah, we had some discussion about that.
Because now we accept them, because they came from Rogue, but we won't accept them even though the.
I think we probably need to, and I will confess, that part of the conversation I wasn't present for. We didn't resolve it, otherwise you would have seen it written into this. But yeah, that's
Jody,
sort of.
is the idea, I mean, isn't the fact that RCC is accredited through NWCCU, then we're accepting RCC accredited credits, accredited credits, would be the deciding factor?
Yeah, and in some cases, they're not actually transcripted as coming from an institution that we wouldn't necessarily, so that it's kind of like money laundering.
It's credit laundering.
But in some cases,
I don't know.
Yeah, so if it's not accepted here.
Just got an email or they tell RCC that.
Yeah.
that's what RCC, that's not us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Report that.
yeah, we're good, so, anyway, so.
Well, it sounds like we would accept it in many cases, it's just they have to use another route. We're not gonna have this route
That's the
be the way
hope.
they would do it.
Yeah, but again, I mean, in many cases, there just hasn't been any. This is just one of those, frankly, this is sort of a low-hanging fruit in terms of what we needed to clean up in terms of policy. The fact that it exists is weird, and it's not a particularly efficacious policy, nor was there a lot of need for it. But looking at it in the other way, in a couple weeks, or hopefully next meeting, we'll bring you the CPL policy that will say every student on campus will have the opportunity, pending departmental identification of prior learning experiences that they would like to assess and that they would like to apply credit to. That's gonna be fun. It'll be bigger.
And the other one was about the grade change, and so currently it's 7th week is the deadline, we wanna move it to 11th week, so finals, like after finals presumably?
Yeah.
So they would know like what they got in the
Yeah.
course, and they could change.
Yeah. And that happens constantly anyway. There's an awful lot of overriding the policy in order to meet the needs of students, and this is just codifying that.
Okay. I guess my question now is a comment. Yeah, it's my understanding that the old policy of the 7th week, there was essentially this, I'll call it a loophole, or a common practice of people coming, later, happen to hit our department maybe a little more than some, because somehow we seem to get more C minus, C, D plus E kind of grades. But anyway, I don't know if that's true. But anyway, I guess what I'm kind of curious about is, I've read this out in the open, so
Oh, yeah.
I'm definitely in favor of this
Oh,
policy.
I feel that way.
But I also, I just got paranoid because actually, as a person who's kind of a just-in-time kind of person, my grades often go in Tuesday evening of the 12th week, right? Because finals, that's just the beginning of the grading process. I'm just momentarily got paranoid that I'm going to get a bunch of emails saying, can you tell me what my grade is so I can decide whether I need to change the path? I guess I can always just ask him, I just ignore it.
I think that's a really good point. That didn't come up in the discussion of this. And I guess my hope, it's funny, I've been having a conversation about this with reference to a specific student, that we often feel as though they have a fairly good idea going into the final experience, whether it's a paper or project or the exam or whatever, to make an informed decision about that. But I think that's a good point, and I would be happy to take it back to the committee. We meet on Friday. If you wanted to ask us to make an amendment, I think that we could think about that.
Well, I don't know if I'm worried about a problem that'll be widespread, but it seems like, gosh, if we're gonna wait to the end of the 11th week, why not let them?
Well, that's really, and it's a likely scenario that you're describing, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, well, we're now in week 15 and we're managing one, you know, and so
Right.
I totally agree with you.
I mean, I'm
As
pretty
Dave
good.
Carter, I totally agree with you.
And then Dave said, I'm perfectly willing, with- I just think that, you know, if, to some students, they really have no confidence, they sign up for pass, no pass, and then all of a sudden, wow, I'm getting a B, I'm getting a B plus.
Well, and the other thing is, you know, there's students for who sort of rely on Moodle without realizing that Moodle may not necessarily be providing an accurate calculation of their grade, or in other cases, they're not necessarily receiving sufficient information in the incremental steps leading to the final grade. So that does them a little bit of a disservice as well. So I think there are lots of scenarios within, and that's what this policy I think is intended to address, but again, I don't know what would be problematic about moving to week 12 rather than week 11, and I will certainly take that back to the policy.
Now that we're talking about this, I wonder,
Uh-oh.
would it be,
Can't open forms
would it be
everywhere.
problematic to even extend it to the end of the next term so they can actually think about it and talk about it with their advisors and that kind of thing? I'm just wondering what the rush would be now that we're talking about graduation day.
I'm sorry, I'm sneezing so loud.
Is it because of graduation, is that part of?
Yeah, I think that might be it. I think they would lose the opportunity to do things like apply for graduation, they would lose the opportunity to know. Remember, some of these are gonna be prerequisites or things that they have to take in order to move into other things. I think it's giving, and it would be their own decision whether they wanted to push it out further. But I don't know, that's a good question. I can take that back to the committee as well. Yeah, that's a lot of work for Dave.
Sorry, evidently the can is all the way open. Many programs like ours have a rule that says you must take our programs graded, not pass, no
Most
pass.
do.
Yet I'm a teacher that I don't know who in my class is taking my class, pass, no
Mhm.
pass. And as an advisor, I don't know which of my advisees is taking this class, pass, no pass. So a student who might make this jump to make it pass, no pass, to save their GPA or whatever, now has to take the class again or fight again to get it changed to a grade. Is there any movement that we might know who's taking our classes, pass, no pass, or advisors might know so we could get ahead of this?
That's, I don't know. I'm assuming, if I'm to believe what I know about Banner 9, I can't think that that couldn't be something that's indicated on class rosters and in the information that you have available to you, but I think that's a great point. And I don't think it disadvantages the student in any way. I can't think of any bias that gets introduced. If
Well, I
there's
don't know, I
knowledge of
guess-
that, I mean, it may, but
It could. I mean, I'm probably more interested in my advisees than I am students sitting in my class.
yeah.
That, hey, you know, I'm going to do this, but you're just going to have to take it again or fight the battle again.
Yes, the question.
I've just dealt with one where somebody's applying for a professional program now and needs a grade. And they're already graduated.
Well, in
and it's a
financial
mess.
aid, yeah.
So,
They
So-
don't understand the repercussions of that sometimes.
Dave? Oh.
See,
Another, I'm just kind of thinking about logistics more than I am about specific timeline, although, I mean, I would welcome not too much past the 12th, but somewhere there as an actual date, but what is the process? Because it seems like they would have to do something, whether it's fill out a form, check some boxes on an e-form, something. And then my point being, it seems like that might be a place to have kind of all caps, flashing red letters or whatever. Make sure you understand, you know, there are rules about, exactly what Mark said. Most of us do have majors where if the credit's pass, no pass, it no longer counts for.
I don't think we have a program, I don't think we have a major that doesn't require, I can't think of one.
Yeah, but anyway, no system is foolproof, I get all that, but it seems like if the more we can do to educate and sort of force them to look at some stuff, to say beware, be careful. Because, yeah, we don't want them to turn it to pass, no pass, and then not satisfy a department. Of course, a lot of times we're telling students, they're on the edge.
Stay in
change it-
class.
Change it to
Change
for grade,
class, yeah.
D's passes, and
Yeah.
no passes, nothing, so.
Yeah, and we have,
Take the D.
we have a lot of situations where they change it to pass no pass, they get their grade, and then they want it, you know, they change it to pass no pass, and then they, oh no, I want it to be a letter grade again. So they do that too. So, I think that's a good question. The mechanism now is they just send a request to ESC it, but, I don't know that, I don't know if volume will go up or what will alter if this policy is to be approved. So we can talk about that. I can get some more information and come back.
I do agree, by the way,
I'm not
it
busy
wasn't clear, I
teaching.
like the idea of later, I think, because they do have more information. And maybe there's a diminishing or negative return for it, but 12th week would be my
Well, week 7 is also about panic time, about when they're feeling really kind of uncomfortable about things.
Right.
And I think that a lot of bad decisions or a lot of
Yes.
decisions that are informed by other factors occur in that time frame.
I agree.
I know I make them.
Thank you, Jody, and if you could make sure that you or Dave updates me as if you all do decide to make an alteration to that one before.
Okay.
All right, moving on now to the approval of university studies proposals from SOA that were introduced on December 2nd. Those two courses should be in the drive. They were the SON 211 approved as a non-lab G-strand, and SON 339 approved as a J-strand by the University Studies Committee. Anyone like to make a motion?
I move we approve that. Recommendations.
That's currently the motion.
I would, happy to keep them together faster.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the two university studies recommendations, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, those are approved, thank you. Next up, we have a review of OAO graduate curriculum. Are you the representative?
I'm Terry Longshore, I'm the chair of
All right.
And we would like to defer our enthusiastic vote in favor of approving this change to the OAL curriculum to our faculty member from that program.
So one of the things we've discovered in our master's degree program is not everyone wants to do a thesis, and a lot of them want to do a project. And we've looked at other programs across the nation and here at our own school, and we've noticed, yeah, there are theses and projects for the master's programs, and it would really lay out well for our degree program. So we wanted to add basically the word project to where it says thesis. We changed the wording a little bit, but they still would have an academic component to it. I mean, it's going to be rigorous. They're going to go through the original methodology class, and the way we see it is, they're going to have the same intro, theoretical foundation, a lit review, and then where it gets to the methodology section where it's going to change. And this will also help us out tremendously because currently I've been doing all the thesis projects, which is a lot. So we're doing 12 thesis projects, more than I ever imagined could possibly be. So now we're going to be able to take that and spread all our projects and amongst our faculty members there, and it's going to be a lot more equitable. And so we're going to, for example, we have a cohort, and we're going to take 3 over here, 3 over here, and I'll get 3, and I'm going to still do the thesis ones when that come out. And students are very excited about this possibility, and we're moving forward with it right now, and it looks like it'll be great.
We also, this is probably a good time to, there's been a lot of discussion in graduate council as well as in a larger meeting that we had with all the graduate coordinators and graduate faculty and some chairs about theses and graduate faculty roles and responsibilities. And one of the decisions that was made in that discussion was to have a, I don't know if we'd call it a task force, but a group that could get together to explore what different projects look like, thesis projects, that kind of thing, and try and achieve some both institutional consistency, but also ways that programs can support one another. Because the graduate faculty institutional resources spread pretty thin when it comes to projects and thesis work. So we want to make sure that we can get a sense of whether there's an issue and how we can, well, we think there's an issue, but how we can address it. So, and Chad is largely responsible for that. He's been fairly enthusiastic about making sure that we work together collaboratively, so thank you for that.
Yeah, the idea around a thesis is to get a committee, and for people that more qualitative, get someone that but it's hard for someone that's coming here and they're brand new, and well, you need to go get a thesis committee out there, and for them to go interview. I mean, it's hard for me to even know everyone here, right? So setting up the systems in place so that they can get a proper committee together is important.
And then loading.
Loading.
Yeah, there's just a lot of.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It is. When you're reading, 80 to 150 page paper, and you're doing 12 of them. I found my limits. I never thought I would, but I did. And yeah, so you learn how to say no to things and to look at your colleagues. And I'm only a professor over there, so it's nice because the projects are kind of, we can look at bigger projects. We need, for example, we need YERC systems out here in the backcountry. All right, so how do we go about putting 3 YERCs around Crater Lake National Park, and what would be the things that would be involved with that? I mean, that would be a huge project.
That will not be what this group will look at, just these.
Yeah. But I mean, just examples. I mean, there's lots of projects that we can perform out there that can be done in our local environment.
Brian is. So 2 questions on, the original proposal, it said 1 to 8 credits, and then the newer one, or the revised one, is 1 to 6. So I was wondering, A, why does that drop 2 credits? And then the second question is, the original proposal said that the student will present a poster presentation at a conference, and then that was removed. And
Yeah, so when we proposed this, the idea was to do a poster presentation. Those are sometimes harder for these students to get into than we thought. And we don't necessarily line up with SOAR to do it here. So some of the conferences were just tough to get proposals in. So having that as part of it was kind of, we weren't really able to pull that off. So we took that out. The 1 to 6, they need 6 in order to graduate. And we want to make them repeatable, so they can be repeatable anyway, because for example, some students don't finish up by that fall, and so they may take a couple extra thesis credits to continue on. And so they're repeatable anyway, but they need 1 to 6 in order to graduate.
the first one said 1 to 8. So
Yeah, and I think they made that because they were, why, if it's repeatable, why don't we just say it's 6, which is the required amount.
I don't want to go too far in the weeds here, but I'm just trying to understand this briefly about a lot of these issues come up with senior capstones.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to understand 2 parts of this. One part is kind of what changes for the student in terms of what they do, and then another part changes for how you sort out the workload for your faculty. I think you've addressed that part. But for the students, essentially, they're still writing up a paper with all of these elements and all that. So it's almost, I don't want to overstate it, but it's a little bit of a label change, so you don't have to have all of the elements of a thesis and a thesis committee, but it's still something where basically the project advisor, I should call you, can parse that out, so you do 3 students and there's in the committee. Is that where, what's that the main difference? Okay.
And again, we're looking at working with other graduate council people across the campus to really solidify what this does mean.
Any further questions? I'll come back with you. All right, well, that brings us to any announcements or new business.
Our MAT applications were technically due Friday. We're down a little bit in numbers, so we would really love your help encouraging any students who think they might like to be teachers, seniors, past students. We're still going to take people on a space available basis if they're qualified. And you get good students in your majors when they have good teachers. So it's in the long run, it benefits you. And if any of them have questions about the MAT, feel free to send them to me, and I'm happy to do some pre-MAT advising anybody who needs it.
Just cautious pointing to
Announcement.
Have we gotten to announcements?
Yeah.
Excellent. Great.
I thought we were still at the end of all right. Yeah, so with Campus Theme, we just this weekend concluded the first event for the winter term for the Campus Theme. Enrique Chacon and I presented a program of improvisational music at the Black Box Theater on Saturday with the assistance of OCA, and especially Mike Stanfield, who sacrificed a lot of his free time and enlisted a lot of great students to help make it happen. It was great. We had about 65 people in the audience, which was impressive given that we had very little time to promote the event, and given also the place and time of the event and the beginning of the term and everything. And we've got a couple other things coming up. So here's a poster, and this is also provided in the drive. so you can take a look at it more closely. But on the 22nd, so Wednesday of next week, we've got a philosopher of science, Caitlin O'Connor is coming from UC Davis to give a talk on the misinformation age, and I think that's the title of a recent book as well, which just came out last year, I believe. And that's going to be, so the 22nd between 7 and 8 p.m. at the Science Building, room 151. And Mary Ann is also giving a presentation, Mary Ann Golding, on the 29th, and here's a little flyer. Could probably put that in the drive for those who are interested, but Mary Ann came up with it, which I think is quite nice, this flyer. So she's going to be giving a presentation in the Lease Room at the Hannah Library on the 29th of January, which I think is also a Wednesday, 7 p.m. And that's called 3 Ordinary or Extraordinary, in parentheses, Stories of Survival, Unlikely Connections, and Likely Uncertainties in World War II France. And so those are 2 events coming up, and there will be more information of events that will come later in winter and also in the spring term. We've got a number of great programs in the offing. So, thanks.
Any other announcements from new business? I'll note, for any of you who have been secretly hoping to break out as actors, or if you know anyone, the Digital Sonora program has been doing a casting fair this month, and so tomorrow evening and Wednesday evening from 6 to 9 in the Digital Media Center. It's an open casting call, so if you'd like to be in student film, or again, know anyone who might, including theater students, so please come forward. Anyone can come anytime in those hours, 6 to 9 p.m.